Welcome to my first YouTube video. It has been so long in the making. I've been procrastinating hella. One of the main reasons is I was waiting for the perfect moment, waiting for the perfect take, all that kind of stuff. But I realized it's not going to happen. So in an attempt to kind of combat this, I'm going to be just posting this raw, very unfiltered version of this idea. So here we go. What I wanted to talk about today was the Epictetus idea of the dichotomy of control. And this is a Stoic philosophy. Epictetus is a Stoic philosopher. And I was kind of introduced to this idea, and it came to me via the book The Obstacles Away by Ryan Holiday. I really recommend if you haven't read it yet. It's a good way to transition into Stoic philosophies. And Stoic philosophies, they're pretty interesting, so I recommend reading the book. But that's how it was introduced to me. So to get into the actual idea, think about everything in life, right? I mean, it's a little daunting, but think about everything in life. Epictetus says that everything in life can be split into two groups, and it's only one of these two groups, so these are disjoint groups. Things that you can control and things that you can't control, right? And initially this may seem pretty self-explanatory, right? But I implore you to really think about what is really in these groups and really think about it. It wouldn't even be crazy to just start writing things down. For example, some things that I came up with very quickly in the not control group, things you don't control. These are things like other people's opinions of you, right? Easy. Your reputation, right? Because it's based on other people's opinions of you. Getting a little difficult here. And then the results of your efforts. This was a very hard one for me to grasp, but yes, the results of your efforts you don't control. You control your efforts, but not the results of your efforts. So I'll get into that a little later. Kind of conversely, things in your control group, your effort, your perception, how you see the world, your principles and your morals, and your actions reflecting those, your immediately body actions, and your control of your emotions. And so, as of right now, this is all very abstract, but I'll get into some different contexts to really hit this idea home. So one of the contexts I want to get into is student or academics, right? So I'm currently a student, and so I've been trying to use this philosophy more and more in my daily life. And so an example of this, I would say, is exams, right? All the students have exams, probably one of the most stressful parts of being in school. So as you lead up to the exam, right, you can study, you can do practice problems, you can go to professor office hours, you can participate in class, any other way that you study, right? And then once you get into the exam, right, you can make sure you get enough sleep before. You can, make sure when you're in the exam room, you're staying focused, you're not letting your stress and emotions get the best of you and cloud your judgment, right? So all of these things are in your control. But the second that you hand that exam off, or submit it, or turn it in, boom, out of your control, right? You don't control how someone else grades it, if they make errors, if they're very biased in their grading. You don't control your exam score, right? So this is what I mean when I say the results of your actions, right? So the result of your action in this instance is your score. You don't control that because there's a buffer there, right? So let me, in the context of academics, kind of expand a little bit. So test scores, you don't control, right? So then therefore, GPA you don't control, right? Your school acceptances, and then even your internships, right? These are all things you don't control. So I see a lot of students, and I'm guilty of this too, they will, be really stressed out about these things. They'll submit an exam and they'll stress over it for a whole week, oh, I wonder if I did this right. I wonder if I did this right, what I'm saying is it's illogical. And this is what Epictetus is saying, it's illogical to even think about this, right? As soon as it's out of your control, you should give it no headspace, no energy, right? Just leave it be. Another really good context to put this point home is sports and athletics, right? So I used to play sports. A lot of people do play sports. Same kind of thing here, right? Before the game, you can watch film, you can hit the gym, you can practice really hard. All other stuff you prepare, even during the match, you can keep your head, you can give it your all. After the match, focus on recovery. All these things in your control. there's a lot of things that aren't in your control. You can't really control whether you win or you lose the game. As in individual sports, this is a factor with the other team. If they're just better, then they're going to win no matter what you do, right? If you put third graders against the NBA All-Stars, the NBA All-Stars are going to win no matter how much that the third graders do. And even in team sports, even if they're not a better team, your teammates could fumble, right? You don't control your teammates' actions. You don't control the other team's actions. You don't control whether your coach puts you in, your coach's actions, right? So there's a lot of things here that are in your control and not in your control. So think about this next time you are given a situation like this. And the last context I want to explore here is relationships, right? So this is relationships in general. There are many things you can't control in your relationships: efforts, your emotions, your patience, your communication. And then because naturally a relationship involves another person, there's so much that you don't control, right? So literally anything the other person does. And then there's also a million external factors that go into a relationship, So as you might have picked up on, there's a really distinct and clear pattern between what is in control and what's not, right? And what I'm trying to say is the things that are in your control are typically more process-based, and the things that are outside of your control are kind of more results-based, right? So this goes back to what I was saying initially, you don't really control the results of your actions, right? So by now you might be thinking, why, right? Oh, this is super cool, but why would I think about this or adopt this way of thinking? So for starters, and this is something I'm into, it may not be what you're into, but it's a very logical and rational way of thinking. It really separates the emotion from a lot of things. And if you're not into that, that's fine. I just wanted to say that because I'm kind of into it. But there are other reasons, right? So one being freedom from anxieties. Once you realize, that most things you've been stressing about actually aren't in your control, you kind of gain freedom from it, right? They're no longer on your mind. And I know this is easier said than done, but recognizing that is the first step. With this worry-free life also comes a lot of personal growth. Once you stop wasting your time and your energy on these things that don't matter, you don't have more time and energy to focus on your goals, the things that do matter. And your effort in your pursuit of the goals, that should what really define your happiness, because you do control that, right? It's going to lead to a greater sense of self. And then finally, I kind of got into this before, but you will have greater emotional regulation. There'll be less swings, right? Lower highs and higher lows. And you'll be just more steadily and overall happy, right? So there's a lot of reasons why someone would do this, but just from there, you'll just be happier, right? And isn't that enough? So all of this that I've covered so far has kind of been low-key a history lesson. I'm kind of just spewing what I know and trying to get you to understand this theory or this idea that Epictetus came up with, right? But now I want to get into something that kind of I came up with, right? I don't know if it's necessarily novel in that no one else has come up with it, but I came to these conclusions via my own head, on my own, right? So the idea is, it stemmed from a conversation I had with my good friend Simon, and it started with he asked me the question, are you enough, right? And so naturally, my next question was okay, how do you find enough, right? And we kind of got on this little tangent of by what metrics do you assign value to life, right? How do you know if you're doing well in life? And so we thought about it for a while, and we came up with some sources, right? I said, are my relationships good? Are my grades good? Are my career progress good? Is my physical appearance good, right? All of these are pretty basic, but I thought they were decently good. And then I talked to a bunch of my other friends, and they all said mostly the same thing, right? But I realized a little later that most of what I was saying is kind of out of my control, right? My GPA, as we concluded, is out of my control. A large part of my relationships are out of my control. my career progress, my internships, whatever, out of my control. And I will say, like, my physical appearance, for the most part, it's in my control. I guess there are some factors that will bar me from that, like genetics or my ability to go to a gym, stuff like that. But you get what I'm saying, right? Isn't it not like, is my value system not innately flawed because what I'm assigning value to, I can't control, right? Like if I were to say, oh, how well I'm doing in life is if my NFL football team is doing really well, right? That'd be like totally irrational. But I'm kind of saying the same thing here because the NFL football team is out of my control. And a lot of the metrics that I was using is also out of my control. So what I want to change and what I'm striving towards is a more process-based approach to life, right? So I don't control the results, but I can control the process. So if I switch these metrics of how I am doing in life to things I control, like how well the process is going, right? So for example, I know I'm kind of talking in a loop here. For example, how much effort I'm putting in towards chasing my goals or chasing my dreams. That's something very actionable and something very in my control. It's like entirely in my control. How much effort am I putting in terms of my goal, right? And that is like kind of all encompassing, right? Because my goals can now include career goals, physical appearance goals, school goals, relationship goals, right? Like, I need to adopt this way of thinking because it's the only way you can think. And I'm kind of losing my point here, but you have to adopt a process-based approach because you don't control anything else but the process. So to kind of sum everything up here, you really got to find value in the process rather than the results because you can't control the results. And as I stated before, like, this is very raw and ongoing idea that I'm still working through. I just came up with it a couple weeks ago, and like, I'm only 20 years old, so like, who am I to talk about life? But this is the conclusion that I'm going for, and this is something that I'm trying to implement now in my life, is focusing on the process, really focusing on the process, and trying to ignore the results. I know it's very difficult, right? Because how we've grown up and what we've been told is it's all like, with the rise of social media and everything, it's all results, right? But trying to focus on the process, that's what I'm going for. And yeah, I guess that's it. I know this video is very raw, and it's probably going to be pretty jank too, but I would appreciate any feedback. I'll work on the editing style and stuff like that, but mostly feedback on the idea. Obviously, I'll take feedback on anything, just the style of the video too, but mostly the feedback on my idea, the theory that I was working on, the dichotomy of control idea, and just in general, right? So yeah, that's it. Thank you.